Welcome to the Deep Dive. Ready to go on a trip with me today?
Always. Where are we headed?
This time we're flying south, all the way to Guyana.
Oh, interesting. What's going on in Guyana?
Well, the political scene is heating up, and we're going to break it all down for you. Think of this as your exclusive briefing on what's going on.
I like the sound of that. What kind of intel are we working with?
We've got a transcript of a recent press conference held by the Alliance for Change, or AFC. It's one of the major political parties in Guyana, and let me tell you, they had a lot to say.
I bet they did. Elections are coming up in 2025, right? Lots at stake.
Exactly. And this press conference was packed with statements from key AFC figures, plus a really lively Q&A session with the press.
So we're getting the AFC's talking points, but also how they respond when put on the spot. That's valuable.
Absolutely. We're talking education, indigenous rights, land allocation, the whole 9 yards.
Sounds juicy. But I'm guessing this isn't just about political drama.
You're right. What's really fascinating is how this press conference reveals deeper concerns within Guyanese society.
So it's a window into the anxieties and hopes of everyday people.
Precisely.
Yeah.
We're talking about anxieties about the quality of education, management of the country's resources, and whether there's truly fair and transparent governance.
Big stuff. The kind of issues that resonate with everyone, no matter their political leanings.
Okay, so let's jump right in. The first big issue the AFC raised is education. They're sounding the alarm about the state of primary education in Guyana.
Now, Guyana has had its share of educational challenges, right? What's different this time?
Well, the AFC is citing some pretty worrisome data from the National Grade 6 Assessment, which is the exam that determines which secondary schools students go to.
High stakes. So what's the data showing?
It shows a huge gap between the government's targets for student pass rates and the actual results. Like in Region 1, they were aiming for a 25% pass rate, but only 12% of students actually achieved that.
Wow, that's a significant difference. More than half didn't reach the target. Are other regions struggling too?
Yep. Regions 7, 8, and 9 are also falling short, so it suggests this isn't just an isolated problem.
So, lack of resources, teacher shortages. What's at the root of this?
Well, the AFC is arguing that it's more nuanced than just those factors alone. Guyana's education system has historically been unequal, reflecting broader socioeconomic disparities within the country.
Makes sense. Resources tend to flow to where the wealth is concentrated.
Exactly. Some regions have been chronically under-resourced, and there are ongoing challenges with attracting and keeping qualified teachers, especially in remote areas.
So the AFC is basically saying the government's current approach isn't cutting it.
Yeah, and they say that while initiatives like school feeding programs, which make sure kids are getting a meal, are good, the focus needs to shift to making sure that students are actually learning effectively in the classroom.
You can lead a child to a textbook, but you can't make them learn.
Right. Exactly. So the AFC is proposing a national program with a heavy emphasis on teacher training, better recruitment, more support for teachers, especially those working in difficult situations.
Sounds like they're trying to tackle this from multiple angles.
They're also calling for more investment in school infrastructure in places to make sure that students have a safe and good place to learn.
Okay, so that's the education front. What else did the AFC bring up?
Well, they didn't stop there. They also had a lot to say about indigenous rights, especially regarding the Amerindian Act of 2006.
Yes. That's the legislation that covers a wide range of issues impacting indigenous communities in Guyana.
Right. Land rights, resource management, even self-governance. It basically lays out how these communities interact with the state and the rest of society.
So what's the AFC's beef with it?
Well, they're saying the government is stalling on revising this act, and that they're not truly committed to indigenous rights.
Why is revising it so important, though? I mean, it's been around for a while.
Because the world has changed a lot since 2006. There are new challenges related to things like land grabbing, the environment, and climate change that the current act doesn't really address.
So it needs an update to keep up with the times and protect indigenous communities effectively.
Exactly. The AFC says the government's dragging its feet on consultations with indigenous communities, which are crucial for getting input on the revisions.
That doesn't sound very inclusive or participatory.
Right. And the AFC is highlighting that they actually started these consultations years ago when they were part of the coalition government. They're trying to show they're the ones who take this seriously.
Okay, so they're positioning themselves as the true champions of indigenous rights.
Exactly. And they're drawing a sharp contrast with the current government's approach. Now, shifting gears a bit, this press conference also got into the nitty-gritty of government spending, specifically capital expenditure.
the money the government spends on big infrastructure projects. What's the AFC's take on that?
Well, they're raising concerns about how this money is being used. They're saying there's not enough transparency and that many of these projects are being mismanaged.
Like what? Cost overruns? Delays?
Exactly. They even threw out a pretty staggering number. Get this. $7.3 billion US spent on capital works between 2020 and 2024.
Whoa, that's a lot of cash. And they're saying a good chunk of it has been wasted.
That's their claim. They pointed to the Gas to Shore project as a prime example. It's already facing delays, and a contractor's filed a claim for cost and time overruns.
So that $7.3 billion is likely to grow even bigger. Ouch. Any other examples?
Oh yeah, they mentioned Guyana's electricity sector being on life support even after tons of money's been invested.
Not a great sign.
They also talked about traffic congestion, bad drainage systems, and even finished road projects that are already falling apart.
Yikes. If I were a taxpayer, I'd be pretty upset.
Right. It's like they're throwing money at problems without a real plan or accountability, and the AFC is trying to tap into that public frustration, especially with the elections coming up.
So they're basically saying, hey, if you want your tax dollars used wisely, you might want to consider a change in leadership.
It's a pretty clear message. And things are about to get even more interesting as we delve into the land allocation controversy. This is where things get a bit more spicy.
Ooh, I love a good political scandal. Lay it on me.
Buckle up, because the AFC is calling for a full-blown investigation into how land's been allocated under the current government.
Oh, so they're alleging some shady dealings. Favoritism.
You got it. And they're pointing fingers at some high-profile figures within the government and their buddies, saying they've been getting prime land for cheap or through questionable means.
So they're basically saying there's a culture of corruption, where people are using their power to enrich themselves.
Exactly. And wait till you hear what they have to say about the AFC leaders' own land dealings. Things are about to get really personal.
Oh, snap. A plot twist.
Yeah.
The AFC leaders caught up in this too. This is getting good.
It is. It's like this whole land allocation issue is a tangled web, and everyone's caught in it. We're going to unpack it all in part 2, so stay tuned. All right, welcome back to the deep dive. We left off with some pretty serious allegations about land allocation in Guyana.
Things are getting a bit heated in Guyanese politics, huh?
Oh, yeah. Remember, we're looking at this press conference from the Alliance for Change. And in part 1, we covered the AFC's concerns about education, indigenous rights, and even some eyebrow-raising government spending.
Right, and they're claiming there's this whole culture of corruption going on, especially when it comes to who gets their hands on valuable land.
Exactly. But it turns out the AFC leader himself is now facing accusations about his own land dealings.
Oh, this is getting juicy.
Yeah.
So what are they accusing him of? And how is he defending himself?
Well, we're about to dive into all that, but first, let's rewind a bit to that Q&A session with the press. Remember, that's where things get really interesting, because we see how the AFC leaders handle tough questions and defend their positions under pressure.
Totally. It's like watching a political chess match unfold. So what were some of the standout moments in this Q&A? What really caught your eye?
Well, a couple of things, really. For one, a journalist brought up the cash grant program, which is a big deal in Guyana. It's meant to provide financial assistance to people, especially those struggling to make ends meet.
Right, I've heard about that program. There's been some controversy around it, hasn't there? Concerns about who's actually eligible and whether the money is being used effectively.
Exactly. And with elections coming up, there are also worries about whether it could be used to influence voters.
Oh, I see where this is going. So this journalist was basically trying to connect the dots between the cash grant program and the whole debate about the accuracy of the electoral list, right?
Yep. They pointed out that there were reports saying something like 600,000 people had registered for the cash grant, which is a pretty big number.
I bet the AFC didn't like that very much. After all, they've been claiming the electoral list is bloated and unreliable.
You know it. Mr. Hughes, the AFC leader, he basically dismissed that 600,000 figure, calling it absolutely news to them. He said they wouldn't use that data as any kind of indicator of the voting population because they still have serious doubts about the electoral list.
Okay, so they're not buying it. They still think something fishy's going on.
Oh, yeah. They even shared stories about AFC members who'd run into problems with the cash grant registration process, like reports of dead people still being listed and stuff like that.
Yikes. That doesn't sound good. So are they basically saying there's deliberate manipulation happening?
That's what they're suggesting. Another AFC leader, Mr. Patterson, even chimed in, saying something like, Someone in the government might be using magic wands to inflate those figures.
Wow. That's a pretty serious accusation. It seems like they're doubling down on this whole issue of electoral integrity and saying the government might be trying to rig the system in their favor.
Yep, they're not holding back. And this whole theme of distrust and potential manipulation, it runs through a lot of the other stuff they talked about too, especially the land allocation controversy.
Oh yeah, things got pretty personal there, didn't they? Especially when the journalist started grilling Mr. Hughes about his own land deals.
Right, they really put him on the spot. So here's the deal. One journalist went straight for the jugular, asking about the land Mr. Hughes had bought on the left bank of the Essequibo River. And they pointed out reports that the person he bought it from might have been squatting on that land illegally.
Ooh, that's a tough one. How'd he handle that?
Well, he admitted he couldn't say for sure how long the previous owner had been on the land, but he insisted that whether the guy was squatting or not, it wasn't relevant. He said he still had to go through the proper channels, with the Guyana Lands and Surveys Commission, pay the fees, and wait for their inspection and approval.
So he's basically saying, hey, I follow the rules, regardless of the situation with the previous owner.
Exactly. He's shifting the responsibility to the Lands and Surveys Commission, saying if they did their job and approved the deal, then it's on them, not him.
Clever way to deflect the blame. But I bet those journalists didn't let up.
Oh, not a chance. Another journalist brought up a news article that showed a company connected to Mr. Hughes had gotten land in Ogle for way less than its market value.
So now they're trying to catch him in a contradiction, saying, how can you accuse the government of corruption when you're benefiting from the same kind of shady deals?
Bingo! And it puts Mr. Hughes in a tough spot.
So how did he get out of that one?
He stuck to his guns, saying he didn't personally have anything to do with the negotiations for that land deal. So he couldn't really say why the price was so low.
Distancing himself from the specifics, but not denying the deal happened or that he benefited from it.
Right. It's a delicate balancing act. He also said he's totally willing to have a full investigation into everything and even challenged the vice president to do the same. He wants an inquiry into land deals under both their administrations.
Whoa, turning the tables. Now he's accusing the government of the same stuff they're accusing him of.
Exactly. Classic political strategy. When you're under attack, you go on the offensive. And it seems like that's their approach to the upcoming elections, too, especially when it comes to biometric verification.
Oh, yeah, that was the big part of their platform, wasn't it? They want to use biometrics to make sure the elections are free and fair.
Right. But there's been a bit of a snag. The head of the Guyana Elections Commission, or GECOM, basically said any plans for biometrics are on hold until after the elections.
Oh, that's got to be a blow to the AFC. They were really pushing for that. So how'd they react? Did they give up?
Nope. When a journalist asked Mr. Hughes what the AFC's next move would be, he quoted that famous line from opera. It ain't over till the fat lady sings.
Huh? Love it. He's a fighter. So what's the plan? How are they going to get around GECOM?
Mr. Hughes laid out a couple of strategies. First, they're going to keep talking to international groups and countries that are friendly with Guyana, presenting evidence that biometrics can be implemented quickly and easily.
Smart moves. International pressure can be pretty effective, especially if they can convince key players that biometrics are necessary for fair elections.
Right. And they're also going to keep working with the private sector, trying to get them on board with supporting biometrics.
So they're building a coalition to push back against GECOM, trying to create this sense that biometrics are inevitable so GECOM can't just ignore it.
Exactly. And remember, all this is happening in a super polarized political climate with lots of distrust after the 2020 elections, which were super messy, to say the least.
Right. Those elections were a real nail-biter.
Yeah.
So the AFC is trying to frame this whole biometrics thing as vital for national stability, saying it's the only way to ensure people trust the election results.
Yep. Making it a matter of public confidence in democracy itself. And speaking of the 2020 elections, there was another interesting question during the Q&A. A journalist asked for an update on the AFC's internal review of those elections, which, remember, were incredibly controversial.
Ah, yes. The AFC promised to do this review to figure out what went wrong and how to prevent similar issues in the future. So are they ready to share their findings?
Not quite yet. Mr. Hughes said the review is still in progress, that they're still gathering info, and that they'll announce a start date later. He also made it clear that this is an internal review, so the public won't get to see it.
Interesting. So they're keeping things under wraps for now. Why do you think that is? Why not just release the report and use it to criticize the government's handling of those elections?
Well, a couple of reasons, maybe. They might still be collecting evidence and want to make sure they have a solid case before they go public. Or they might be worried about the political fallout, especially with elections coming up. Releasing a super critical report right now could backfire.
Yeah, they got to be strategic about their timing. This review could be a powerful weapon, but they need to use it wisely.
For sure. Plus, by keeping it internal, they have more control over the narrative. No leaks or misinterpretations.
So this Q&A session has been quite a ride, hasn't it? We've seen the AFC facing some tough accusations, navigating setbacks, and trying to use this platform to hold the government accountable.
It's like we got a backstage pass to Guyanese politics, seeing how things really work. The AFC is trying to present themselves as a credible alternative, highlighting issues that matter to people and saying they're the champions of transparency and good governance. But the question is, will it be enough to convince voters?
That's the million-dollar question. We've only just begun to unravel this whole situation. Stay tuned for part 3, where we'll look at what all this means for Guyana's future, especially with those elections right around the corner.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We've been on quite a journey through Guyanese politics, haven't we?
We have. Analyzing this press conference from the Alliance for Change has given us so much to think about.
Right. We've heard their concerns about education, indigenous rights, government spending, those land allocation issues. It's been pretty intense.
And remember, this wasn't just about political posturing, right? What struck me is how this press conference exposed some really deep anxieties within Guyanese society.
Exactly. It's like they hit a nerve, talking about things that people genuinely worry about.
The quality of education, how the country's resources are managed, fairness, transparency in government, those are big deals.
And they're concerns that go beyond party lines, right? These issues affect everyone.
Absolutely. And that's what makes this analysis so important for our listeners. Understanding these underlying currents helps you navigate the political landscape, no matter who you are or where you stand.
Exactly. So let's zoom out a bit. What's the AFC's game plan here? What are they trying to tell the Guyanese people?
They're painting a picture of a government that's more interested in lining their own pockets and holding on to power than actually serving the needs of its citizens.
It's that classic us versus them narrative, right?
Yeah, but it can be pretty effective, especially when people are feeling skeptical of those in charge, and they're doing it by focusing on issues that hit close to home.
Like what?
Their kids' education, protection of indigenous cultures and land, responsible use of taxpayer money, fair access to opportunities. This isn't some abstract political jargon,
Yeah.
This stuff has a real impact on people's lives.
And they're not holding back on calling out the government either, are they?
Nope. They're directly accusing them of being shady, engaging in questionable deals, even messing with the elections. But they have to be careful,
How so?
They can't alienate voters by being too aggressive or making claims they can't back up. That's where their focus on facts and evidence comes in.
Right. Remember all the data reports and examples they cited?
Yeah, it's like they're saying, don't just take our word for it, look at the proof.
Smart move in this day and age with all the misinformation flying around. They're trying to build trust and credibility by being grounded in reality.
Which is super important. But is it enough? Can a campaign focused on facts and figures really compete with one that plays on people's emotions and beliefs?
That's the big question, isn't it? And it's something for you, the listener, to ponder as we get closer to those 2025 elections. What do you think matters more to voters? Evidence or emotional appeals? Will they buy the AFC's message of accountability and transparency? Or will other factors like ethnic loyalties or the economy play a bigger role?
Those are all questions that'll be answered in the coming months. But here's another one to consider. What happens to Guyana, regardless of who wins? What's at stake here?
That's a great point. Guyana's at a crossroads, right? They've got all that oil wealth that could change everything.
Yeah, but that also comes with challenges. Managing expectations, making sure everyone benefits, avoiding the corruption and environmental damage we've seen in other oil-rich countries.
It's a tough balancing act. And the AFC is basically saying the current government can't handle it.
Right. They're arguing that Guyana needs new leadership to navigate all this and create a future where everyone thrives.
Whether they can convince enough voters, well, we'll see. But one thing's for sure, this press conference has really shaken things up in Guyanese politics. It's forcing people to confront some tough choices.
It has. So, as we wrap up this deep dive, we encourage you, the listener, to think critically about everything you've heard. What stood out to you? What worries you? What questions do you have about the future of Guyana and how it fits into the bigger picture?
Remember, an informed public is vital for a healthy democracy. By engaging with these issues, asking those tough questions, demanding accountability, you're playing a role in shaping the future, not just of Guyana, but the world we all share.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
We hope this deep dive has given you the tools you need to stay informed and involved. Keep an eye on Guyana, because this story is far from over. And remember, the most important question isn't what we think, but what you think.